Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I'm offering an amendment to flat fund the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA, to keep it at the FY24 enacted level, saving $57.8 trillion. On CISA's website, the mission reads, quote, "We lead the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure." Unfortunately, CISA has strayed far from this mission. 2 years ago, CISA was part of the infamous Disinformation Governance Board, which was established at the Department of Homeland Security to censor Americans' free speech. While the so-called Disinformation Governance Board was rightfully disbanded a few months later after enormous public outcry, many will be shocked to learn that CISA has not stopped monitoring and censoring Americans' free speech. According to a 2022 news report, CISA drafted plans to target, quote, "inaccurate information" on a wide range of topics, including the origins of COVID-19, the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine, racial justice, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the nature of U.S. support to Ukraine. Also, business records released by Twitter suggest that CISA distorted its mission from protecting the nation's critical cyber and physical infrastructure into controlling what Americans can say and what speech is acceptable online. This is terrible. Americans' First Amendment should not be regulated or controlled through government by proxy censorship. CISA was first created before my arrival in Congress with bipartisan support. Under the Trump administration, CISA focused on foreign disinformation, countering foreign influence. Unfortunately, since the current administration took office, CISA has aggressively shifted beyond the original mandate of countering foreign threats. In January of 2021, CISA officials renamed the Countering Foreign Intelligence Task Force, one of the key bodies of countering disinformation founded during the Trump administration, to the, quote, "mis, dis, and malinformation team." They took the word foreign out of the title. Last summer, the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government released a report titled, quote, "The Weaponization of CISA, How a Cybersecurity Agency Colluded with Big Tech and Disinformation Partners to Censor America." Several disturbing details about CISA were released in this report, including that CISA is, quote, "working with federal partners to mature a whole-of-government approach to curb alleged misinformation and disinformation, and that CISA wanted to use the same taxpayer-funded nonprofits as its mouthpiece to, quote, "avoid the appearance of government propaganda." This is simply censorship by proxy. And last week I had a conversation with the director of CISA, and she told me that this report by the Subcommittee of Weaponization is full of inaccuracies. Basically, it's not worth the paper it's written on. I strongly disagree. I think our Weaponization Committee has done a phenomenal job. CISA needs to return to its original mission of strengthening and protecting our national cybersecurity and infrastructure, not censoring Americans' free speech. CISA's bloated budget and the agency's increased weaponization mission to police free speech has gone on simultaneously. There's a clear connection. Given extraordinary increases in funding, CISA has used taxpayer dollars to censor Americans and target speech that they find disagreeable. Therefore, I offer an amendment to flat fund CISA to maintain the FY24 enacted level. This agency must be refocused on their true mission, not given more funding to continue undermining our constitutional rights. The only thing that gets agencies' attention in Washington, D.C. is funding. So flat funding CISA for FY25 is simply putting them on notice. I would say a shot across the bow would be the Navy way of saying it, to get their attention and cease the weaponization of this agency. I hope that all members of this committee will support this amendment to correct this weaponized agency and thereby defend our First Amendment rights for all Americans. Thank you, and I reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from Nevada arise?
Mr. Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Illinois.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I join my friend, the chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, in shared opposition to this amendment. Instead of discussing cuts to our cybersecurity agency, also known as CISA, we should actually be discussing investing more. We cannot continue to play these political games. We don't have the luxury of doing that if we want to be serious about staying ahead of our foreign adversaries. And given what we know, we should be serious. We have all been warned about the clear intentions of the People's Republic of China, that it considers every sector that makes our society run as fair game in its bid to dominate on the world stage. The FBI director told us that PRC's plan is to land low blows against civilian infrastructure to try and induce panic and break America's will to resist. And they are not alone in their plans to use cyber and other capabilities to threaten our national security, our economy, and frankly, our way of life. Now, I assure you, our adversaries are not holding back on their investments, and they are not playing by the same rules. We have unfortunately already seen their capabilities and the kinds of disruptions and destruction they intend to cause to the United States and our allies. It is really unspeakable that we are having a debate right now about cutting our premier cyber defense capabilities. Now is not the time to reduce our ability to defend our nation's cybersecurity posture. We should be investing in it. I oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back.
I reserve, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Nevada reserves. Georgia is now recognized.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do I have remaining?
1 minute.
All right, thank you. Well, first I'd like to commend the chairman here of our Appropriations Subcommittee. On sections 544 and 545 of this bill, I think it's critically important to prohibit the funding to classify or facilitate the classification of any communications by a United States person as mis, dis, or malinformation. But I think, though we put the policy in the bill, it's the funding that gets agencies' attention, as I have mentioned before. So I think it's critically important to ensure that the funding that we have, all right, sends that signal to CISA that they cannot abridge Americans' First Amendment rights through modifying what people can see by classifying information. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia yields back. This gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I inquire the parliamentarian how much time I have left?
Gentleman has 3.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little history, and you can use it however you like. In this year's, in the 2024 Appropriations bill, we cut CISA $15 million. And it was because of this switchboarding issue. And so, I agree that it's like, hey, sometimes, you want to get somebody's attention. Appropriations, it's money. That was done this last time. As we look at what this agency has been doing since then, and I appreciate the history, and the history is strong and warrants attention. I think we dealt with that last time. Not that you can't, oversight is an ongoing and continuing thing. But when I sit here and I look at this and say, we're going to flat fund them, that's the proposal, and I say, well, how are you? Where is that funding going to come from? And so just a standard, there you go. Your flat funded is like at a time when their mission domestically in terms of infrastructure, whether that's utilities, whether that's any number of things, communications. I mean, this in the media, it's like if you're going to buy a car, somebody hacked the outfit that does all that cyber stuff to make it easier to do. If you're going to go to a casino, those folks have been hacked. If you want to make a reservation for it, and so the mission is growing. And you say, well, who's the mission? What's that about? That's not about our friends, ladies and gentlemen. That's about folks who do not wish us well. And so Russians, Chinese, all that other sort of stuff. So I would be more comfortable with this if there was a trigger saying, if we find out you do this, we're going to come get some money. I would be more comfortable with this if it's like, here's where you're going to take it from. It's a funny time to be telling the folks who are in charge of cybersecurity in the non-DOD sectors, we're going to flat fund you. And I do not believe that money is the answer to every problem that we come across. But the mission has never been more challenging. I think the oversight has been good under this director, and quite frankly, the recent history, they're headed the right way. Doesn't mean you take your eyes off of them, but to go back and say you're flat funded, quite frankly, I think it's a curious time. And so, reluctantly, I don't support the amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Nevada yields back. The question